It started like any other day for Officer Daniels, a seasoned cop patrolling his usual route. That was until he pulled over an elderly black woman for what seemed like a routine traffic violation. Her calm demeanor and piercing gaze caught him off guard, but he dismissed it. Thinking it was just another ordinary stop, he began asking for her license and registration. What came next, though, changed everything. As he dove deeper, a series of small but strange details began to surface. The car was registered to a federal agency, and the ID she handed him wasn't an ordinary one. Confused, Daniels began pressing her with more questions, but her quiet confidence unnerved him. Just as he was about to arrest her, she leaned in and revealed something that left him stunned. The woman he was about to cuff wasn't just any citizen. She was FBI, and she had her reasons for being there. Officer Daniels froze for a moment, trying to process what he'd just heard. The woman stared back at him, her calmness unshaken despite the flashing lights of his patrol car illuminating the scene. FBI. He muttered under his breath, his hand instinctively hovering near his radio. Who was this woman, and why was she driving through his quiet neighborhood? Sensing his disbelief, the woman reached into her bag slowly, keeping her movements deliberate. Daniels tensed, unsure of what was coming next. She pulled out a badge, authentic, unmistakable. The words Federal Bureau of Investigation gleamed under the streetlights. But if she was FBI, why hadn't she identified herself sooner? Why let things escalate to this point? "Officer, you're making a mistake," she said, her voice calm but firm. Daniels felt a flicker of doubt creep in, but questions swirled in his mind. What was she doing here? And why did she seem to know more about him than he did about her? Officer Daniels hesitated, his grip tightening on his flashlight. The badge looked real, but something about this whole situation felt off. He'd seen scams before, people posing as law enforcement to avoid trouble, but this wasn't the usual case. Her car, her calm demeanor, and now this badge, it all pointed to something bigger. If you're FBI, why are you driving alone in the middle of nowhere? And why didn't you say something earlier? He demanded, his voice firm but unsure. The woman took a deep breath, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Because I needed to see how you'd handle this," she replied, her tone unreadable. Daniels frowned, his instincts screaming that there was more she wasn't saying. "Handle what? What's going on here?" he pressed. Before she could answer, a voice crackled over his radio, cutting through the tense silence. "Officer Daniels, we've got a situation downtown, possible federal involvement. Stand by for details." He froze. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Who was this woman really, and what kind of trouble was heading their way? The air around them grew heavy as Officer Daniels listened to the static-filled message from his radio. He glanced back at the woman, her expression steady but unreadable, and felt a growing sense of unease. Something big was happening, and he was caught in the middle of it. "Who are you really?" Daniels asked, his voice sharper now. The woman met his gaze, her calm composure finally cracking just a little. "I told you, I'm FBI. And if you don't let me go right now, you're going to regret it, not for my sake, but yours." Her words hung in the air, daring him to challenge her authority. Before Daniels could respond, headlights appeared in the distance, speeding toward them. He instinctively reached for his holster, unsure whether the car was a threat or backup. But the woman didn't flinch. "They're here," she muttered under her breath, almost to herself. The vehicle screeched to a stop just feet away, and two men in dark suits stepped out, moving with urgency. Daniel's heart raced as they approached, their expressions grim. "Officer, step back," one of them ordered, flashing an FBI badge. "This is a classified operation. You've interfered long enough. Daniels didn't move. He was torn between following orders and demanding answers. "What's going on here? What operation?" he asked, his voice edged with frustration. The older man sighed, glancing at the woman. "We don't have time for this. If you want to know the truth, you'll have to trust us. But right now, you're either with us or in the way." The tension was unbearable, and Daniels knew he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't fully understand. Officer Daniels' mind raced as the two agents stepped closer, their sharp movements and hushed tones signaling that something much bigger was unfolding. He glanced back at the woman, who now wore a faint smirk, as if she knew this moment would come. "You're in over your head, officer," she said softly, her voice carrying both warning and amusement. Before he could respond, the older agent leaned in, his voice low but intense. "The woman you pulled over isn't just FBI. She's undercover, and your little stop just compromised months of work. Now we need her back in the field before everything falls apart." Daniels stared at him, stunned. This wasn't just about a badge or an operation. The stakes were far higher than he'd imagined. But then the woman spoke up, cutting through the tension like a knife. "That's not the whole truth, is it?" she said, her tone laced with quiet defiance. Both agents froze, exchanging a sharp glance that Daniels didn't miss. "You didn't tell him why you're really here," she continued, stepping forward. Daniels felt his stomach drop. Something about her words hit differently, like she was holding a trump card no one expected. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice barely steady. The woman turned to him, her eyes locking on his. "They're not just here for me. They're here for you, Officer Daniels. You're the real reason this operation's in jeopardy." Her words hit like a thunderclap, leaving Daniels speechless. The agents shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. For the first time that night, Daniels wasn't sure if he was in control, or if he was the one being set up all along. The night seemed to close in around them, the tension thick enough to cut. Officer Daniels could feel his pulse hammering as the woman's words sank in. "What do you mean they're here for me?" he demanded, his voice rising despite the knot in his throat. The older agent hesitated, then sighed deeply, as if bracing himself for what came next. "Daniels," the agent began, "your name has been coming up in ways it shouldn't. Unusual connections, flagged communications. Someone out there believes you're involved in something we'd been investigating, and we needed to find out for sure." Daniels blinked, stunned. "You think I'm involved? In what? I've done nothing but my job." His voice cracked, a mix of anger and confusion. The woman stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "It's not about what you've done. It's about what someone thinks you've done. And that's dangerous. Tonight wasn't an accident. This whole stop was a setup." The words hit Daniels like a blow. The agents weren't here by coincidence. They had orchestrated everything, putting him in the crosshairs to see how he'd react. But before he could say anything, the woman continued. "And now, thanks to them, the people watching you think you're onto them. You've just become their next target." Daniel's breath caught. "Target? What are you talking about? Who's watching me?" The older agent's radio crackled with a frantic voice. Code red. "We've got movement, location compromised." The agents exchanged a panicked glance before drawing their weapons, scanning the dark road around them. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance, this time coming fast. The woman grabbed Daniels by the arm. "You wanted answers. Here's one. Trust me, or this ends badly for both of us." The car screeched to a stop, and shadows spilled out, armed and moving with purpose. Daniels had no choice but to follow her lead, the night spiraling into chaos with no guarantee he'd make it out alive. The chaos erupted instantly. Daniels, heart pounding, followed the woman's lead as the agents exchanged gunfire, with the armed group spilling out of the car. They darted into the cover of nearby trees, the woman moving with a sharpness and precision that Daniels could barely keep up with. "Stay close and don't do anything stupid," she hissed, scanning the darkness. Moments later, the agents managed to push back the attackers, and the night fell eerily silent again. The older agent turned to Daniels, his face grim. "You've been cleared," he said abruptly. "We planted breadcrumbs to flush out the real threat, and it worked. Those men, they're part of the organization we've been chasing. You were bait, and they took it." Daniel stared at him, his chest tight with disbelief. The woman placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're alive because you played it smart," she said. "But be careful, this isn't over." Without another word, they disappeared into the night, leaving Daniel standing alone in the quiet aftermath, his life forever changed.